So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews. We'll discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Daniel Swepson, who's co-founder and marketing director at both Show and Tell and Next Chapter. So, firstly, Daniel, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Chris. Daniel Swepson. I'm co-founder and marketing director of a digital marketing agency called Next Chapter. And I'm also marketing director of our sister agency brand, which is called Show and Tell. So effectively, we are behind the scenes one business, one agency, kind of one team that all work together in the same office. But externally, we have two different brand names. Next Chapter brand is primarily inbound marketing, SEO, content marketing, digital advertising, all that kind of stuff for B2B and professional service brands.
Right?
And the show and tell side of the business specializes in branding, design, UX, web design, and web build. Again, for B2B and professional service brands. So we have a lot of client crossover between the two brands, but externally, we kind of form or operate, sorry, under different names, and we have separate websites. And there's a whole kind of bunch of marketing reasons kind of for that. But yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So a lot of great help out there for businesses. Obviously you've talked a little bit about type of business, B2B and professional services.
Yeah.
What in general makes a great client for you? Who do you service best? What will be the characteristics?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different sectors that we kind of specialize in within, B2B and professional services, quite
Yep.
broad. There are specialist sectors that we operate in. So, commercial property is one in particular, cyber security, finance, legal firms, that kind of stuff. Our perfect kind of clients, their business really is um, probably it's a long sales cycle and it's quite a considered purchase. So, you have some agencies out there and some brands where, they sell their products online. Someone sees something on Instagram, comes to the website and purchases, and you've got that really quick transactional
Yep.
kind of return. Where we specialize is working with brands where maybe it might be an 18-month to 24-month
Right.
sales cycle. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's all around um engaging with those prospects and converting them into becoming leads, but then nurturing them over quite a long period of
Right.
time. And then eventually when they do convert or they become a customer, for example, it's probably quite a large
Yeah.
monetary value. Um, in terms of our ideal client, it will be someone who needs help from both sides of the camp, so from both agency brands.
Yeah.
So, our an ideal client really, they're constantly investing in their website. They're constantly wanting to redesign certain areas of their website or improve the conversion rate. We always say that a business's website is like its shop window.
Yeah.
You don't dress your shop window and then leave it exactly the same for 2 years.
Yeah.
You're updating it, you're changing things, and businesses that are willing to constantly invest in improving their website to get better results, that's kind of
Brilliant.
perfect client for us. But also that client then that needs support throughout that entire lead nurturing and conversion process through to sales. And that's really where the Next Chapter brand and the team there at Next Chapter kind of come into play.
Brilliant, brilliant. And from what you said, and I've seen this too, is that nurturing phase is so important because if you're making a large purchase, you don't want to go straight to the bottom line. It is about understanding and being felt like I'm making an active choice, I guess.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And there are so many different nuances to that journey. In marketing, we tend to map user journeys and they be quite linear,
Yep.
which, you know, if only the purchasing process was that linear and that kind of
Yes.
the same for everybody. It just isn't. And that nurturing process really is about trying to make sure that we are providing information or content to a prospect that's relevant to the stage that they're at in their journey. So, are they really kind of early on? Are they just looking to maybe shortlist some suppliers, or are they in that early research phase? Or actually, have they been to our website a couple of times already? They've engaged with quite a few social posts. They've potentially maybe even already had some kind of consultation on the phone. The content and things that we serve to that person is going to be very different.
Yep.
Um, and the thing that we kind of strive to do most at Next Chapter is to automate that as much as possible. So,
Right.
not many of our clients have marketing teams of 10 people and sales teams of 20 people.
Yes.
Very typically, it's a handful of people in sales and two people in the marketing team, if you're lucky. So, trying to look at bits of kit and software that we can
Yes.
implement that will automate that as much as possible is a really big part of what we kind of help our clients do.
That makes a lot of sense because I often find in working with that sort of SME owner managed businesses that the key sales activities are often done by the senior people, the owners, founders often, and it's not so much the skill level because obviously they know a lot about their business and the products and services. It's often the consistency of continually nurturing. I think is where automation comes in so valuable. I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. So we specialize in implementing a CRM called HubSpot,
Right. Yep.
which I'm sure lots of people will have heard of. But yeah, effectively, the CRM is at the core of that. And then around that, you've got marketing tools and sales tools and various elements of automation. A big challenge that we help our clients overcome is this alignment of sales and marketing, is kind of how we describe it. So quite often, when we first engage with a business, you'll have you might have some conversations with the marketing team, what are their goals, what are your objectives, etc. And then you go and speak to the sales team, and the goals and objectives are very different.
Yeah.
And then it becomes quite obvious early on that, that's why there's probably a bit of friction between the two
Yes.
because um, they're not really communicating effectively
Yeah.
enough with each other and being clear about what their expectations are. And actually, some of the automations and things like that in HubSpot to implement that, sales and marketing have to work together.
Yeah.
They have to get aligned and get on the same page. Um, and there has to be that constant communication. If a lead gets handed over from marketing to sales and sales can't progress it for whatever reason, it's so vital that when that lead is handed back to marketing, so is some context as to why, and then
Yes.
marketing then can adapt. People always talk about sales and marketing, and kind of a bit of a bugbear of mine is it should be marketing and sales because marketing comes first.
I agree completely. Yep.
But the two are so kind of dependent on each other. But yeah, quite often they're working in competition with each other. And if you can kind of break down that barrier and get them to collaborate on the particular project and communicate better, then we just see, the results and the conversion rates and all that kind of stuff start to go up, and those teams work much more
Yes.
efficiently.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think, my slight bugbear is the fact that we group them together. You often have a sales and marketing team as
Yeah.
opposed to a marketing team and a sales team, and because I think the interface between the two quite often is a grey area, and it needs to be defined to be really clear. When does lead generation and marketing become sales, and make sure the handover is as graceful and as informative as it could be, so that the client sees no big change of you were here and now you're here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And a piece of kit like HubSpot kind of sort of does exactly that. So you've
Brilliant.
got your marketing team and your sales team working from the same system.
Yeah.
So, when that lead gets handed over to sales, they've got that running timeline and that history of all those different engagements and interactions that lead has had already with the business. And equally, when that lead progresses then and that deal in HubSpot becomes closed and it's got a monetary value against it, a marketing team then can see really clearly which of our efforts, which of our channels or tactics is generating the most amount of revenue.
Brilliant.
I've had instances before with clients where they, they say we need to spend more on paid search because it's generating the most amount of leads. Let's move budget away from LinkedIn advertising and put more on paid search. Well, actually, when you then dig a little deeper, paid search might be generating more leads, but the value of the ones that you're getting from LinkedIn is way more. So actually, you should
Absolutely.
be doing the opposite. You should be generating fewer leads, but they're going to spend more. And it's having visibility of that data that allows kind of people like myself and clients to make those decisions. But yeah, that kind of piece of software is something that I've used for over 10 years and implemented in various businesses. And it really does kind of sit centrally to, I would say, the success of what we do for our clients to be able to demonstrate value in marketing.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, it comes to mind whenever we do. As an organisation, we describe ourselves as the generalist rather than the specialist. So we work with lots of specialists like yourselves, but in general, to be the support to a business owner across marketing and sales, but also
Yeah,
leadership team building a whole lot. But when we talk about marketing as generalities, we often I remember I've got a great slide. I've got to find it out actually, but we do a little quiz with if we're in a group of people, we do a quiz A and B, which is the best marketing strategy, and we'll go. This one produces 100 leads. Exactly. This one produces 100. This is 10. Which would you invest in? Well, 100. Okay. Conversion rate. This one
yeah,
converts at 1 to 10. This is the value of sale. And then we even go down to things like number of referrals that you
yeah.
get from those leads because it really is important to dig deep, isn't it, and just really understand where as you talked about revenue and profit, not just
Mhm.
number of leads is it can be a fallacy, and of course dealing 10 times as many leads if they're not as relevant can take a lot more effort, whereas there might be a better sweet spot, I guess.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's always a real telltale sign when we start working with a new client and we kind of ask the marketing team, what was the return on the marketing investment, or what's the turnover or revenue value of work that marketing have generated. And typically, if they don't know and they can't answer that question, to me, straight away, I'm saying, okay, well, you're not speaking to your sales team enough for
Yep.
whatever reason.
Yep.
You know, that
Agreed.
alignment is not there because everybody across the board should be able to say marketing generates X percentage of our total revenue, and X percentage comes from upselling to existing customers and X, Y, Z.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I just think if the marketing team can't answer that question, then they're not buying their sales director or their sales manager. They're not buying him or her a cup of coffee or a pint often enough, and
Yep.
really kind of probing them to find that info out.
Bang on, absolutely bang on. I could talk all day on this because it is a subject I'm
Yeah.
really keen on. But if we talk more about you, Daniel, let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got into business, and why this particular one for you, or these particular two for you, I should say.
Yeah, so not a typical kind of route, I would say, to starting a business, which to be honest, I'm sure probably most what is
Yes.
what is a typical route. Um yeah, so I I have a business partner called Charlie, who he originally started the show and tell side of the business about 15 years ago.
Right.
And I have worked in marketing agencies for 10 plus years, some down south, and kind of some up here in the north and around Leeds. And I was myself getting to a point where I was kind of thinking, you know, I really enjoyed where I worked and I was very comfortable in the agency that I worked in previously.
Yeah.
Comfortable not being a positive word there in that sentence, I would say. I was starting to get to the point where I was kind of thinking I could very easily just keep doing this and keep doing what I'm
Yeah.
doing, but I need to do something. I need to push myself somehow
Yeah.
to get to that kind of next step
Yeah.
of being in that kind of ownership, managerial kind of role across an agency. And I'd been just kind of poking around on LinkedIn. And I think I must have seen something on LinkedIn and somehow clicked, and that led me to Charlie's LinkedIn profile. And very shortly afterwards, I just got a message from him saying, "Hey, by any chance are you looking for a new role at the minute? Like, if so, it'd be really good to chat." Blah blah blah. And I kind of thought, oh well, Yeah, I mean, might as well. It's an opportunity,
Brilliant.
pursue every opportunity and check it out. And quite early on, he kind of what he was looking for was someone to come on board as a partner with him
Yep.
and create and launch the next chapter side of the
Right.
business. Um, and just straight away, I was like, well, that sounds like that challenge and that push that I need,
Brilliant.
that I'm looking for, but actually I can do it alongside someone who already has 15 years under their belt experience of running a successful business. So yeah, there was no real kind of big interview process or doing big business plans and going in and pitching them or trying to source funding or anything like that. It was purely one kind of LinkedIn message. Are you interested in potentially doing this? Which led to a couple of Zoom calls and then a couple of pints and a few evenings in Leeds.
Brilliant.
And yeah, about 3 months later, I kind of came on board and we started working on creating next chapter and the brand and what our service offering is and getting that ready for market.
Brilliant. And as you've grown, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome?
Yeah, so probably quite a couple. So next chapter launched just over 3 years ago.
Yep.
Um, I think definitely recruitment and talent finding.
Yep.
Absolutely. There's it's purely not because the talent isn't there, because I definitely think, and I firmly stand by, the talent in this particular area is some of the best in the country.
Yep.
As I said earlier, I've worked with agencies, I've worked with kind of in similar agencies down south and up north. And yeah, I just think, yeah, the talent just massively kind of trumps a lot of the talent that we maybe get down south.
Yep.
So it's not for lack of talent, but it's purely, I think, it's time consuming, shortlisting, interviewing, think so our interview process, part of it is we put out a brief and we get people to come back in and do a presentation to respond to that brief. That takes time, that takes up a lot of
Yes.
time. And also, I think one thing that I found probably difficult in that area is being quite decisive, you
Yep.
know, um, building out a new team, kind of starting from scratch. It's quite difficult to sit and really think about, okay, what skill sets do we actually need? When do we need them? How do we prioritize that?
Yep.
Unless you've got a big blank check for investing in hiring and things like that, you've got to really carefully think about what's going to deliver the most value or what actually potentially for hiring this area, I could potentially get X amount back in terms of
Yes.
increased revenue from that person. And I think just knowing what's the right decision or what's the right route to kind of go down. Which is why, working with and having Charlie on board as a business partner has been super helpful because he's done a lot of that. Um, but also, yeah, I think a lot of that just comes down to um, yeah, just trusting your gut and almost like having faith in your own decision making. Can be quite, they say it can be quite lonely at the top, and if
Very
you make
much so.
yeah, if you make a decision, there's always that little voice in the back of your head going, "What is this the right decision? Is this the wrong one?" I think sometimes you just have to go for it,
Yeah.
and if it is the wrong one, then you will bounce back and you'll figure it out because there's no other option.
I mean, absolutely agree. And w- most of the successful people I know and have met and worked with, it's their ability to make quick decisions and act on them
Yeah,
that stands them out rather than the caution of not, a lot of people think about what's the risk of making a decision, go in a particular direction. And for me, it's also needs to be balanced by what's the risk of not.
yeah,
And it's a bit like as you described earlier about staying in what you described as a comfort zone. What was the risk of it was something that got you out of that was doing this, and we can stay where we are. It's a lot of people think that's the safe zone. Often it's the most dangerous place to be because the world's moving on. If we
yeah,
stay where we are, there's plenty of businesses that have come and gone because they didn't change.
yeah, yeah. And I'd say probably quite early on, one of the challenges that I kind of faced was, taking it probably too personally when maybe things didn't quite work out how, or when
Yes.
things didn't quite go the way that I necessarily wanted them to. Instances where you might lose a client, for example, or you might be pitching for a new client and not get that project. And I think early on I used to probably, yeah, really take that on as, well, what did I do wrong, or why, blah blah blah. And I think I probably quite quickly learned that's not going to get me anywhere.
Yeah, great.
And I kind of shifted my mindset to be, almost this thing of accepting that, yeah, yes, things will go wrong, and things will sometimes go in the opposite way to the one that you wanted them to. But I always try in my head and think, okay, well, what was it, if any, what was any learning from this? Like,
Great.
if I can take one learning from this, then it hasn't been a complete waste of
Yep.
time or money or investment or whatever. Um, but I think, yeah, quite early on, I very much took things personally.
Yeah.
And I had to quite quickly force my mindset to shift to be along the lines of, it's not personal. And if, as long as I can go to bed at night and sit and think I did everything I absolutely possibly could
Yes.
to make that work, and this is what I learned as to why it didn't work, then it wasn't a complete,
Perfect. Bang on
useless.
that. I mean, a couple of things that come to mind. We often talk about one of the simplest models that we work with people on for success is
Hmm.
is what we call taking ownership of our future, being accountable for results, responsible for action. So
Yeah,
that's winning. Losing is blame, excuses, and denial.
yeah,
And that's fairly straightforward. But I often say to people, self-blame is still blame. So
hmm,
being accountable says, yeah, screwed up, but I'm going to own it and learn from it, as you've rightly said, and move on.
yeah,
But when we make it feel personal because we're blaming ourselves, that doesn't help us,
yeah,
in many ways. But and if it helps, I remember our founder Brad Sugars is a very successful guy. He told me a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. He said he believes he's successful as he is because he's made more mistakes than anybody else he knows.
yeah,
Not despite, but because and for me, it's the willingness to do it and the acceptance of learning from the outcome and doing something different. And by consistently making decisions and acting on them,
mhm.
he's able to adjust and trim and be, and plot a very successful course.
Yes, which, yeah, for a perfectionist is very difficult to get your head
For a
around.
perfectionist, it's almost impossible.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So no, I totally get that. It really is difficult in that
yeah,
sense. And it's very much and I work with one or two perfectionists and it's really important to ask them or ask ourselves a slightly different question because the question we're trying to answer is what's the perfect or best way forward?
mhm,
Whereas the better question is what are some of the best ways forward, and then
yeah,
let's pick one, if that makes
yeah,
sense. It's a very slight variation of theme, but it often helps people unlock a faster way of making decisions.
yeah.
And think about what we've learned, and whether that's from challenges or successes. What are the biggest learnings that you have about around building a successful business?
I think biggest learning is, um, yeah, I think kind of mentioned one of them a little bit, like, that idea of trusting your gut. If something
Yes.
feels a bit off, then it's probably because it's off, or, if you're unsure or you think, sometimes you might end up with certain conversations and think, oh, this sounds a bit good, too good to be true, probably because it is. Um, and also I think, yeah, just really trusting the team around you.
Great.
Um, and again, I think sometimes that ties back to this, trying to learn not to be such a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Um, and just accepting, as your business grows and as more people and your team gets bigger and you get more clients, it's never going to physically be possible for you to be everywhere all at one
Yep.
time. So, you know, invest in build learning trust and building learning to trust the team that you've got, and invest in them and building their confidence in their decision making.
Brilliant.
I definitely think is, yeah, the biggest the biggest learning. And I think, um, yeah, if you can start to get yourself on that journey and that trajectory, it
Yep.
can be quite, I would say, like mentally quite freeing.
Yes.
Actually, it's only then when you look back, as I mentioned earlier about hiring people in itself is so time consuming. Well, equally, your brain only has so much capacity and you only have so much thinking power in a day. If a really high percentage of that is going on worrying what other people are doing and are they doing the job good enough and are they doing it to how I would do it, if you can start to free up your thought process from some of that,
Yep.
then actually you can free yourself back up to think about, okay, well, what's next for the business, or doing more of the stuff that is your actual passion and originally got you to that point of having that business.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
bang on yeah, it's so key, and yeah, as you say, trusting others, or even being open to the idea that, and again, for perfectionists, it'd be more challenging, but there might be people out there that can do it better than us.
Yeah.
And that's a really difficult one in many ways.
Yeah.
But it is like saying, well, if there were, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
Um, our job truly as business owners, business leaders, is to become redundant and become
Mhm.
dispensable, so we can move to the next level and allow other people to fill our shoes, I think.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well, which actually is something that a kind of a previous boss told me, and it was along the lines of like, there will always be more work to do, but some of it can wait till tomorrow. And it was kind of
Right.
around this idea of, when you're spinning a lot of plates and you're trying to cover a lot of bases, you very easily could sit at your computer at your desk for 12 hours and not get everything done that you have to do. So yeah, like, don't be so hard on yourself and
Yeah.
restrict yourself so much. And make sure that you do, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, as a business owner, you should only work 7.5 hours a day because that's the working day, because it's just not realistic. It's not the reality for a lot of people. Um, people have commented to me over the years and said things about, oh, you shouldn't work on evenings, or you shouldn't do that bit of work on this time, and blah blah blah. And I'm very much of, well, I do it because I want to do it. If I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't be doing it. And yeah, I think if you know that cutoff point, or you make sure that you don't
Yes.
do it all the time, every time, and make sure that there are certain days where actually you do close your laptop at 5 o'clock and you go to the gym, or you go for a walk, or you pop round and go and have a drink out with your mate or whatever. Like, make sure that's super important, I think, to make sure that you
Yes.
do that. And that feeling of, oh God, but there's more work that I should be doing. There's always going to
Yeah.
be more work that you should be doing.
There always will be, and I love the phrase slow down to speed up. It's
Yeah,
not about how hard or fast we work. It's about the value of what we do, and as we sort of develop ourselves and our businesses, it's about the value of what we do
yeah,
rather than, I think you said, we talked earlier about quality rather than quantity. It is about the value of what we do, and I do think it's important to have that focus on self-care, that what is right for us. I do find. I meet with lots of business people, business owners that say, "Oh, well, I don't, what they say, oh no, I enjoy working long hours," and that's the phrase. And my view, what I suggest is, if you're loving what you do, that's fine. But I
mhm,
still meet a lot of people that are, in effect, lying to themselves that they're enjoying what they're doing. They think that's the only way it can be, and I think it's important to be able to break that mold and say, this isn't the only way. There are other great people out there that can help me do what I do.
yeah,
But if you're loving it, keep doing it. That's the point. If you'd rather do that than some other thing, um, why wouldn't you do it really? If that's pleasure, but
yeah,
it's important that it is pleasure. I remember our founder, and he was doing an event, and one of the things we work with people on is valuing an hour of our time in the role that we should be in. So as a business owner, our role primarily is growing the business, and you value that. It's not the hourly rate we charge a client, but it's what would you, and the proposition is, anything you could pay somebody a lower rate to do an hour of stuff that's at lower value is going to be more profitable, more valuable for the business. So,
yeah,
and he happened to just sort of throw out there. He said, as an example, I've not cut my own grass for like 15 years. And this was just by coincidence. A guy right in the middle of this audience. There was several hundred people, and the guy in the audience stood up. He was determined. He said, "But Brad," he said, "But Brad, I like cutting my own grass."
yeah,
And Brad, and he didn't. This was just just the natural reaction to something somebody said, and he didn't mean it any other way than he'd ever said. In fact, and he just said to him, "But that's because you haven't got a boat."
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess
And
so. Yeah,
I think it's not less. I mean, and the guy might have hated boating. That wasn't the point. Was,
yeah,
are you sure you like cut the grass, or is it something you do because it takes you away from something else, as opposed to what you really want to do? And I think that's being really authentic with ourselves about what we really love and what we're good at, and focus on that, and being able to delegate most of everything else. I think is a
yeah.
really successful strategy. Feels a bit guilty sometimes, though. I don't know if you find it's like, oh, that's I can't give that to anybody else because that's they'd hate that. But
Or I'm quite good at kind of, I'll like I said earlier, I'll work later, and I would say I'm the most productive in a 24-hour period, probably at night, in that kind of
some people are
after you've had your dinner, but before maybe an hour or so until before you go to bed. And for some reason, I don't know why, but I just seem to be able to just churn work out and get everything out
brilliant.
and done. But then equally, when it comes to a Friday, for example, and it gets to 4 o'clock and it's sunny outside and I can see people sat in the beer garden, I don't in any way then feel guilty at 4 o'clock in saying, actually, do you know
Brilliant.
what? I'm done now and I'm going to go and I'm going to start my weekend a couple of hours early and
Brilliant.
I'm going to go and have a pint. And I think it's if are as long as you are implementing balance for
Yes.
yourself and it's not, I've worked 10 days straight, 12 hours a day. Yeah, you might work 1 or 2 days at the beginning of the week where you might work 12 hours a day. But then if that means then that by the Friday you can clock off an hour and a half early and go to the pub, then I think it's super important that you do that.
Brilliant.
Well,
No, I
yeah.
couldn't agree more, especially on a day like this,
Yes.
and the beer's cold. That works for me completely. Um, being a coach, I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation, and I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general. Who's had the biggest impact on you, Daniel?
Yeah. So I would say one of them is probably going to be Charlie, my business partner.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I've really kind of I would definitely say I've made the most of the situation of having and setting up kind of next chapter and coming on board and having a business partner. Just because, yeah, any decision, anything like that, if you're just, if you think, oh, actually, this is a good idea, just having that person
yes,
you can just ping that text to, or that you can kind of put your head over the desk and see
yep,
what they think definitely helps. And then I would say probably my husband would be the other one. So he works in a slightly in a kind of a similar sector, not quite digital marketing, but it's related in a way. And he has run various companies and businesses and things like that
brilliant,
over the years. Um, so yeah, definitely having the same thing then again, at home, and someone who is there to kind of sometimes, you might come home and chat about your day, and someone that will say, well, that wasn't the best decision. Someone who will call you out on that,
yep,
and then you go, oh, and yeah, it was, blah, blah, blah. And then you realize actually it probably wasn't. But then equally, then someone at the end of the day who you come home and you might say, oh, this happened at work today, like super amazing. And they're, equally as like supportive.
brilliant.
I think, yeah, that having those two
Yeah.
definitely yeah, helps me a lot, I would say.
Yeah, it's quite a lonely thing running a business, and to be able to share both in the business and out of the business, as you said, is so key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really key. And whether it's from either of those guys or anybody else, do you ever have any favorite quotes or sayings of and about business and success that you catch yourself using on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's one. And so years ago when I first kind of came out of university and I started working in PR.
Yep,
And I worked in a PR agency, and this is a quote that the head of PR used to say to me quite often. And it was usually because I'd written a press release that was probably a bit boring and it was being sent back with lots of red pen and amends all over it. And I've always used this saying, and it's actually now made it into some of our like brand content when we're talking
brilliant.
about next chapter. And it's sell the sizzle, not the sausage.
So that, yeah, brilliant. So this is what this is. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. So, and I definitely think, yeah, she was using it in the instance of I was kind of writing press releases about things and I was making them probably sound way more boring than they actually were. Um, but yeah, equally, I think in business and your own business and the way that you sell yourself and the way that you sell your products or
Yep,
services, I think if you can kind of keep that in mind that you're selling the sizzle, not the sausage,
absolutely.
there's not many businesses out there that don't have a competitor that offers pretty much exactly the same thing in a way.
Yep,
So you really got to focus on that sizzle. It's everything around that. It's who you are as a person, or it's how you manage your clients or the relationships that you can build with them, whether that be, you building the relationship with the client or the brand building the relationship
yeah.
with your customers. If you can focus and sell on, and you can sell that sizzle, then the sausages will fly off the shelves.
Brilliant. Great. Yeah, great description of how that works. Yeah, we do catch people, including ourselves, talking about selling our service rather than the benefits of the service, and
Yeah,
even more importantly, the problems that we solve.
yeah.
It's like if you can nail that, I couldn't agree more. And similarly, are there any favorite books or podcasts on business success or personal development that you could recommend?
Yeah, there's probably one book. I tend to, it's probably, I don't know, maybe a bit of a faux pas, but I tend to, if I'm reading or I'm watching TV or YouTube or podcasts, I tend to make a conscious decision to not have it be marketing or business related.
Yep.
I really see that as my like switch off kind of
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
um, the majority of podcasts that I listen to are either like true crime or they're about RuPaul's Drag Race or something in some way. But I did recently read a book, and I forget the author's name, but it's called Measure What Matters. Um, and it's about the implementation of the OKR framework.
Yes.
Um,
It is
which,
John Doerr, I think, is the
yes,
author.
yeah,
You're
something.
very, yeah,
Yeah, something along those lines. And someone recommended it to me on a call a few months ago. And I kind of I don't know how they, whatever the way they described it or they sold this book to me, they obviously sold the sizzle or not the sausage.
yeah,
But
great.
yeah, I went straight on Amazon and ordered it. And actually, it's a super interesting story around, the guy who wrote it basically implemented this framework in lots of really now large companies. So
Yeah,
Google being one of the first ones, but Uber, Airbnb, LinkedIn, Microsoft have all adopted this
yeah,
framework. Um, so the story itself in the book is really interesting. It's not just this is the framework and this is
yes,
how it works. It's
yes,
tailored around it, but the framework itself of how to structure and set out objectives and key results and how they should be reviewed and monitored against. I just really kind of liked and latched on to the simplicity and the straightforwardness of that.
yeah,
So yeah, I would say anyone who is struggling to, I guess, articulate what their objectives or the key results or the metrics or how they're measuring their own success, I would definitely say either get the book, Measure What Matters, or even just Google OKR framework. There's loads of kind of
brilliant,
articles, stuff like that about it online.
brilliant, great, yeah, great example, a great book. Yeah, thank you. And think talking about learning, what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your journey so far, Daniel?
Oh, um, I learned I'm a perfectionist. I learned that quite early on.
Yeah, brilliant,
Yeah, and I've learned that I am probably more passionate about what I do than maybe I initially thought before
right. Oh,
starting a business. I knew that I think previously I knew I liked my job, but now it's become more than a job, and I've realized that I more than like it.
brilliant.
Uh, and yeah, I probably say that those two things I've learned how much of a perfectionist I am, and I've probably learned that I
Brilliant.
probably like what I do a lot more than I initially thought.
That's great to hear. I mean, that's the key thing because unfortunately, too many people aren't in, in a role or or a business that they truly love. And it seems
Yeah,
very, I was just talking to somebody earlier about, being really authentic with what drives us forward. And if you can get in that flow of, I love this, I love what we do, I love the outcome of what we do, then, there is that old, the old phrase of if you, what is it? If you love what you do, you never do a day's work in your life sort of thing.
yeah,
And I,
yeah.
I think that's so key. And so looking forward, Daniel, what does the future look like for you guys, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
Yeah, so I definitely think we're really excited about the kind of next few years for both brands, I
Yes.
would say. So, we've recently moved and relocated into Leeds. We did that a couple of months ago. We're slightly repositioning Next Chapter and that brand a little bit, and there's a new website for that coming. Um, as part of that and as part of that journey, I would say, we have actually we've rethought specifically with the Next Chapter brand. We've spent quite a lot of time rethinking about like what it is and what we want it to be. As I said, we launched that brand just over 3 years ago, and um, when what we launched out, the idea in our heads was very difficult to the reality of what it was 3 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But we were just kind of we were like but still perfectly happy with what it had become. So actually, we've kind of reshifted things a little bit to focus more on what we're good at and what we have a lot of experience in doing.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to, yeah, loads of room for us to grow in Leeds. And equally with the show and tell brand as well. And I think, yeah, years, probably a couple of years into the future, um, there'll be maybe some kind of international expansion, things like that. We've done
Brilliant.
quite a lot of, yeah, quite a few overseas projects, which seem to go kind of really well, and everybody's really enjoyed those. So,
Oh, brilliant.
yeah, definitely something that we look to aim for in a couple of years. I think we'll unpack the boxes in Leeds first before we start maybe
Yeah, yeah, that makes
booking
sense.
flights abroad.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm keen to know what you'd say to anyone that's thinking of going to business right now.
Anyone going to business, I would say my number one advice I would say would be to find that champion. I've talked a bit about kind of, having a business partner and how super helpful that's been, then having a husband at home who also has run businesses previously, and that's been really helpful. Doesn't necessarily have to be in those shapes or forms, but I think just find that one person who is gonna kind of egg you on and champion you and back you, whether that just be, a mum, a sister, a brother, partner, best friend, whoever that is, and really utilize and lean on that person for that.
Yeah.
If you are going solo, and for the first year or so, it's probably going to be just yourself before you can hire a team. You're going to really need those people who will listen to you moan about having a crappy day at work, or listen to you, venting all of your problems, but equally, who will give you a high five and a pat on the back whenever something amazing happens. Um, the other thing I would say, and we've definitely found that I definitely find this in kind of the marketing industry, so I'm sure it must exist in other industries, but try and find and tap into that network of other businesses, your competition in a
Yeah.
way, and get a good relationship with
Yeah.
them and have a
Brilliant.
dialogue with them. Because if some industries is super highly competitive, most industries are pretty competitive. But actually, if you can kind of get past that
Yes.
and realize that
Completely
actually
agree.
there's a common ground, what are the differences? Oh, well, they do the same thing as we do, but they do it slightly differently to us. So they're
Yeah.
probably not, actually a lot of your pain points and a lot of your confusions and things like that, they're probably having as well, or have either previously gone through. So
Yeah.
try and find that network and that little pocket of those other business owners, and really try and tap into that and
Yeah.
ask for advice. I would say just ask for opinions and ask for
Brilliant.
advice.
And what I've consistently found is successful people love to help other people. One of the tenets of being
Yeah,
successful is a desire to help others, and it's like therefore because I think what holds a lot of people back is they wouldn't have time for me or I'll be bothering them. But I think most people would say I'd love to help somebody if they just ask me. So if we would love to do
yeah,
that, then we should be comfortable asking others in many ways. I
yeah.
think.
But
Sorry, go on.
But like I said, but also like bother other people.
Yes,
Bother them. If you feel like you're bothering them, keep going and bother them until you maybe get that bit of advice or you get that bit of help that you
brilliant,
need. I'm kind of a firm believer in if you don't ask, you don't get. So, if you want someone's opinion or you want to know what their experience is of managing a certain situation, bother them, ask, reach
brilliant.
out, because all for the sake of maybe replying to a quick LinkedIn message, the majority of people out there are decent and they do want to help and communicate, and
Absolutely.
they will give you an answer.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And finally, Daniel, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do that?
Gosh. Well, I'd find him down the pub probably. Um, yeah, I would say probably don't put at that age, don't put too much pressure on yourself to know what you should be doing or
Yeah,
what you want to do.
brilliant.
I really early on kind of, did A levels and was getting close to finishing those A levels. I had no idea what I wanted to do as a job, and rightly or wrongly, I decided to postpone that decision completely by going and to a university for 3 years and getting a degree. And I just thought in my head, if I can just put off having to make a decision on what I want to do for a living or a job, eventually it will come to me. And I went and moved down south and did a 3 year media studies degree. Um, Again, absolutely loved that. In my third year, then started to think, oh, hang on, I've only got a year of this left. What am I going to do? And it was because I bumped into someone I hadn't seen for quite a long time in London, and they invited me to an event, which then is what led me to get interested in working in PR. And
Brilliant.
that's how I ended up working in a PR agency. So I
Brilliant.
would say, be open to every opportunity and don't put too much pressure on yourself to have that plan and have that idea of what you want to do because you're 18 and you've got the rest of your life to figure that out.
Yeah, brilliant. Very, very sound advice. My 18-year-old daughter is currently in Bali trying to work out what she's going to do next. And
Yeah,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's for just find your way.
yeah,
You're never too old, I think, even to decide and change your mind or just do what you want. Dan, it's been really fascinating talking to you. And thank you so much for your time today. And for anyone that was interested in connecting with you or your businesses, what would be the best way of getting in touch?
yeah, probably like LinkedIn's probably the best way, really. If you just search Daniel Swepson, there's not many people out there with that name, so I should come up quite easily. But yeah, you'll see it'll say co-founder and marketing director of Next Chapter. Connect with me, send me a message. If you're in and around Leeds at all and you want to pick my brains and have a coffee, more than happy to do that. Just yeah, drop me a message, get in touch, and connect on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Well, for now, thank you so much for your time. But it'd be good to catch up with you in another 6, 12 months just to see how things
Yeah,
develop. But for now, thank you so much.
yeah, that was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.